Welcome back to another Doctor Who Robert Harrop limited edition hand-painted figurine statue review. Today we're taking a look at the most recent release, which is in fact an incarnation of the Doctor, and it is the second Doctor from 1966 to 1969, limited edition to 250, and it is currently available on the Robert Harrop website for £65. So basically, if you're interested by what you see in this review, then buy it quick, because the thing with this line is they are incredibly rare after they sell out. At the packaging, it is pretty much exactly the same as to usual, so as you can see at the very top, you get the Doctor Who and BBC logo in the grey format. Then we get the rather nice and snazzy diamond design along the side with the Starfield stretching around to the sides of the box with the Robert Harrop logo at the very bottom, along with limited edition hand-painted figurine. On we get a unique sticker that says Who 28, because it's the 28th figure in the line, the second Doctor, limited edition to 250, and then of course we have the second dates at the very bottom. The sides of the box, you just get the Doctor Who logo in the faded fashion once again, and then exactly the same for the opposite side and the back as well. However, on the back of the box, you do get a little bit of company information about Robert Harrop, nothing on the back of the box there, and then of course on the very top, we do once again get the sticker that is at the very front with some information on, along with the actual unique number for this figure being 105 out of 250. The box itself is made out of corrugated cardboard, so ensures the statue on the inside is protected nicely when in transit. Inside of the box now, once again, we get a little bit more packing to ensure that the statue on the inside is protected. This time we have enough bubble wrap to literally make a whirring cry. So yeah, this ensures that the statue on the very inside of the box is in fact protected, and it does a very good job, as I've never in fact had a damaged Robert Harrop figure. Something to also note, of course, on the inside of the box, you do get the certificate of authenticity to accompany the figure. So once again, this is stylized with the diamond design, much like on the box itself. And then we get the official unit number being 105, and we get a rather nice image of Patrick Troughton there as the second Doctor at the very bottom, along with certified by Robert Harrop. And then on the back of the certificate, we just get a little bit of information about the second Doctor, along with a bit of information about Robert Harrop, along with a rather nice quote from the second Doctor at the very top there as well. And this can just nicely sit next to the figure on display. However, due to this being one of the more recent releases, we don't in fact have a little plaque with the number on and sort of Doctor Who, which would have been nice, because I think that those are quite a nice way to set off the figure if you have them all displayed together on a shelf. Taking a look at the actual second Doctor statue itself. Now, to start with, I'm really excited to in fact have an actual incarnation of the Doctor to add to my Robert Harrop collection, because so far in the line I've really only got the monsters and the villains, so this is in fact my first ever Doctor. So it's rather nice to have an incarnation finally to go on the shelf with the rest of the monsters and villains. And I think it must be said, and something that is addressed very early on in this review, is the fact that the likeness to Patrick Troughton, along with all the other Doctors that have been released so far, are a little bit different to what you may expect from, say, an action figure line or a general figurine line that goes to a more accurate style to look like the person who portrayed that role. For Robert Harrop, they tend to go with something that is a little bit different, and sort of emphasise and exaggerate certain elements and character traits of the face. So as you can see on the second Doctor figure, we have a lot of expression. So we have a rather nice bag under the eyes, and we also have a rather clear sort of wrinkle around the mouth. And I think that definitely nicely represents the second Doctor, and it almost looks a little bit more, not necessarily simplistic, but kind of a little bit cartoony. And I think that it is something that rather nicely represents the characters in this line. They are a little bit different, and the monsters and the villains don't necessarily have the same look, because none of them have actual human features such as eyes and mouths and everything like that you come to expect from a normal human face. Yeah, starting off taking a look at detail, I am going to do something a little bit different for this review and talk about the actual positioning and stance of this statue first. It's something that normally occurs later on in the review. However, due to this being a humanoid character, I think that the pose has something that is very important to the actual statue itself, because it really nicely represents the second Doctor. I love the way that he is almost twiddling his thumbs. He kind of looks a little bit vulnerable or a little bit shy, and it's something that does represent his character traits as the second Doctor really well. And I'm glad that they've actually positioned him to not be holding the flute or anything like that, because I feel like that pose is a little bit overdone, considering how much in the actual series he does actually play the flute. It is not exactly very often, so yeah, it is nice to see something a little bit different. And I think that this really nicely represents the way that he kind of just stands and relaxes within actual stories. Now, I imagine that this can almost be taken from any screen grab of a second Doctor story, and he's kind of just observing the situation and being rather patient at the same time. So yeah, a rather nice little pose, and also rather adorable as well. So taking a closer look at the figure and starting off at the bottom, as you can see, we have the shoes. These have been rather nicely done. We don't have any detail that really stands out for these, however, they have been sculpted rather nicely. A little bit stood apart, which is quite nice. So as you can see, we have a bit of detail on these of the laces and the different sections of shoe. Then we also have the sole sculpted at the very bottom, and the general paint apps on these are quite basic. We just have a little bit of a brown brush stroke on there with a little bit of a dark paint app applied over the top to maybe sort of suggest a little bit of weathering or use or something like that. And then we have a slightly darker paint app along the bottom to represent the actual sole of the shoe. So yeah, those are rather nice. Nothing really too much to talk about there. Moving up to the trousers, however, we do have a little bit more detail, and I love the way that these have been recreated. So we have this really nice texture along the whole of the trousers to represent the checkered pattern, and once again, these have been recreated in kind of a brownish theme. So we do have a little bit of detail on these of, once again, a few different gradients of brown here and there to kind of represent a little bit of weathering, I suppose, on the material. And I love the way that the checkers have actually been engraved into the trousers. Once again, when you rub your finger across these, it really does nicely create a really good texture, and checkers stand out a little bit more when on display as well. The bottom of the trousers of where the cuffs are, as you can see, you have a few creases here and there, and also a few bags of the trousers where they naturally sit on the body of the character, and the way that we in fact have a very high waist on these trousers, much like how the second Doctor had in the actual series, where of course his braces would tie the rest of the trousers to the upper half of his body, which is quite cool. So moving on to the second Doctor's big black jacket. Now, once again, it is quite an iconic design because it does look rather baggy, much like the actual trousers, and we do also have these absolutely massive pockets at the very bottom there as well that have been really nicely sculpted to in fact almost bulge out from the jacket itself to sort of suggest that there may be quite a lot of items in there that he will pick up on his adventures. So as you can see, we have a few creases and lines in there, really nicely representing the way that the material folds. And then also taking a look at the back, we do have a few suggestions of creases here and there as well. And we also do have this rather nice stitching line that runs down the back of the actual jacket itself to kind of suggest where the material is stitched together. And once again, I do think that this is a rather nice shape. I do love the way that it actually drapes down the rest of the body and almost has a little bit of a lip towards the very bottom. Child kind of trying on his father's clothes because it doesn't really look like it fits him, which is once again quite endearing and adorable. Everything about the second Doctor is quite innocent, and I think that they've really nicely achieved this look. We do have a little bit of detailing of the buttons really nicely sculpted on, and the same can also be said for the cuffs of the jacket as well there. As you can see, we do faintly have the buttons really nicely sculpted in, and the same for the opposite arm as well. We have a few more creases here and there to kind of show the pose that the second Doctor is positioned in. So we do have a lot of creases around the elbows, which have been rather nicely done, much like how you would have in real life. And then we do also have the creasing of the lapels there that once again be rather nicely sculpted to in fact protrude from the jacket, with a little bit of detail on there of where the button holes are in real life as well. So that is a rather nice little attention to detail. It may have been nice to have a slightly different paint app on these to maybe bring out the shading a little bit more, maybe just under the lapels or something like that. However, they still look quite cool. Then of course on the opposite side of the arm, once again, we do have a little bit of detailing on there of creases. I do also like the way that we have this line just above the shoulder there to kind of once again replicate where the material is stitched together. Right hand side of the jacket, we do in fact have a handkerchief that has been really nicely positioned to in fact poke out the pocket, and I really do love the paint apps on this, considering it is surrounded by a rather big black paint app. The handkerchief does really nicely stand out, so it does almost look a little bit embossed or glossy there with the different shades of orange really nicely recreated, and it does look a little bit like lava or something like that. So yeah, that is a really nice eye-catching colour. Once again, I do believe that's probably accurate to what is seen in the series. I think that he wore a few handkerchiefs throughout his era, but yeah, that is still a really nice little feature. Finally, for the clothing, taking a look at the shirt that is of course in the middle of the jacket itself. Now I really do like the way that once again this has been painted. I think that it does make it look almost like a pastel-y colour, making it look rather smooth and powdery in design. So as you can see, through the very middle of the shirt, we do have the paint application of the buttons there that have been achieved by using a slightly almost bluish paint app. And then the same can also be said from this very faint line that in fact goes between the buttons, where the material in fact comes together in the very middle of the shirt, which really nicely recreates a little bit of shading, but also gives this white part of the figure a little bit more detail, which I'm really impressed with. A few people have said that the shirt in the actual series is meant to be a very light shade of blue. However, to be honest, the beauty of the second Doctor era is that it was entirely in black and white, meaning that if you turn over to black and white in a nice filter, then pretty much it is correct anyway, because you can't tell if it's blue or white or whatever. So yeah, that is kind of a really nice benefit. To be honest, I think that at least at one point in his era, he would have wore a white shirt. We have this really nice splash of colour there in the very middle, where we have the bow tie tie really nicely sculpted to in fact wrap around the neck of the figure. So this has been really nicely painted, as you can see, in almost this rather nice dark bluish colour. Then we also have a white polka dot that has been added to the top of this as well. Due to this being hand painted, we don't have any paint bleed on this whatsoever, which is really nice and does make the detailing look very sharp. And of course, surrounding this, we do have the rather flappy collar of the white shirt underneath as well that does overlap onto the actual black jacket underneath, which is a really nice little feature. Once again, in almost a powdery white colour, which rather nice skin tone has been applied to the hands. As you can see, we do have the sculpting of the fingers and the thumbs rather nicely overlapping each other. And then we do also have a slightly darker orange paint tap over the top of this just to bring out the detailing of the fingers a little bit more. So taking a look at that likeness to Patrick Troughton, now I think that it is in fact pretty spot on. For once again, that stylised Robert Harrop design, they have emphasised certain facial features quite well. And I think if you lined this figure up along with the rest of the Doctors, you can quite obviously see that it is meant to be the second Doctor. The iconic almost 60s Beatles haircut really nicely stands out, and also the facial features, as I say, is very reminiscent of Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor, as he does have a rather unique face, and it is in fact rather interesting to finally be taking a look at an actual humanoid in the Robert Harrop design. As I said, this is my first ever humanoid to add to the collection, so for the first time ever, I actually get a bit of a look at proper skin tones that are seen on an actual human. So as you can see, the sculpting to start off with is really nice. I do really like the way that they've sort of sculpted the rather nice button nose. Then we do also have the many creases of the face in there as well, especially around the cheek section under the eyes. As you can see, you have this really nice design of the eye bags, as well as the different wrinkles around the face. I think the lips are also quite nicely done. As you can see, these have been achieved by using a sort of lighter pink paint tap to represent the actual lips there, which don't really stand out too much and blend into the skin quite nicely. Besides, I do really like the way that we have the slightly darker gradients of skin tone around the neck area, once again creating a little bit of shading in the paint design, which is rather nicely been achieved. And then of course around the eyes as well, we have a little bit of a similar feature to the Big Chief figures, where we have almost that glazed effect. As you can see, if I just rotate the figure there, in the actual eye sockets we do get a little bit of glossiness, which is really nice, making the figure look very natural. And then we do also have the paint taps in there as well, the slightly darker colour of the pupil, as well as the iris in there as well, being a almost lighter blue. And then of course surrounding this, do have a little bit of white paint in there as well. Unfortunately, on the right hand side of the eye, as you may be able to tell, I do think that there is a little bit of paint bleed just under that lower eyelid, which it would have been nice to maybe have that touched up a little bit more, but hey, it can't be helped with these figures being actually hand painted. And then of course along the sides of this, you do have the eyebrows once again, really nicely painted actually. They're not too over the top. I think that they in fact sit on the face quite nicely and do look rather natural. And of course to finish off the head, you do have a few wrinkles at the very top as well. And of course you do have the detailing of the ears there, just poking out of the rather Beatles haircut once again. And nothing really too much to talk about, to be honest, because it is just pretty much your standard hair design with a few creases here and there to replicate the different strands, looking very natural. And we do have a darker paint tap underneath this, then kind of a lighter brush stroke applied over the top to make a little bit of depth on the hair, once again making it look very natural. So where all the hair sort of grows out of his scalp. So yeah, that has been rather nicely done, and I do like the way this has been sculpted as well. Finally, to finish off the figure, we do also have the uniquely sculpted base. Now, much like the majority of the Doctors, I believe we do have a little bit of a cobblestone kind of street design there with a few bricks here and there. It did rather well. As you can see, we have almost a red brick colour underneath with a brush stroke applied over the top to replicate a little bit of weathering, almost soot and dirt applied over the top there just to get within the cracks of the cobblestone. Nothing really too much to talk about, to be honest. And then of course we have the white trim running around the front of the base as per usual, with the BBC copyright mark at the very bottom there as well. So yeah, a rather nice base, nothing too exciting. And of course at the very bottom we do of course get the sticker, which once again reads the same details on the front of the box, along with the unique number being 105 out of 250. Then this is also finished off with the material base as well, ensuring that when it's on display, it doesn't in fact move about very much due to friction and things like that. So yeah, that is very good and does keep the figure very secure. To finish off this review, doing a little bit of a comparison to some of the other Robert Harrop figures in my collection, including the previously released and now sold out Mandrill figure. As you can see, he fits in quite nicely. Of course, I don't have any of the Doctors, so I can't exactly compare him to any of those yet, unfortunately. However, he does fit in really nicely. He is around the same level as Silurian, because he is of course one of the smallest Doctors, if not the smallest Doctor of all time. He's quite well known for being one of the really small ones. And then of course Sutekh does really nicely tower over him, as he does, because he is of course Sutekh the Destroyer, and where he treads he leaves nothing but dust and darkness. Hey, adding quotes in from the Pyramids of Mars. So just for those people that are interested, here's the Robert Harrop second Doctor compared to the Character Options Classic Series second Doctor figure. figure from, I do believe, all the way back in 2009, as it is the original version that came with the Tomb Cyberman. So as you can see, it's rather interesting to see the different companies' approaches to paint application. I do think the Second Doctor's figure in the Robert Harrop line does in fact have something quite nice about it. The way that it's been coloured and everything about it is just a slightly nicer pose to the character options one. However, that said, at the same time, if you're naturally more a fan of action figures, then you will obviously go for the character options one, as that is of course an action figure as opposed to a statue. So kind of both cater for two different types of audience. So overall, for the Doctor Who Robert Harrop limited edition hand-painted figurine statue of the Second Doctor from 1966 to 1969, limited edition to 250, I think that this is a nice addition to the collection. If you're a Robert Harrop fan who collects the majority of the figures in the line, you will no doubt already have this for completist reasons. However, if you're somebody that just collects the Doctors, then no doubt this is a very welcome addition to the collection for you. It's very nice to finally have another version of a classic Doctor, and it is nice to see that it's not necessarily one of the most iconic ones either, because I do often think that the 60s Doctors are almost a little bit forgotten to an extent, when really they have, well, they should have a lot of credit for the Doctor Who that we currently have today. So yeah, a really nice recreation of the Second Doctor. If you are a fan of the Robert Harrop style, then no doubt you will really like this figure, because it is pretty much exactly the same style to all the other Doctors. I love the way that it has been posed. It is very reminiscent of the character, and also the detailing of the clothing and the way that it has been painted is very nice. Once again, absolutely no paint leaks on the costume whatsoever, which is what you can come to expect with a hand-painted figurine. Is one of the beauties of this line. Then also the likeness to Patrick Troughton won't be for absolutely everybody. Of course, as I mentioned several times throughout this review, it is stylized. Some of the certain features are a little bit exaggerated. However, I still think that the paint apps are pretty impressive for a hand-painted figure. If you are somebody that is more used to actual representations of characters that are spot on to what is seen within the actual series, of course this figure isn't for you. But actually, if you are interested by what I've shown you throughout this review, then I do definitely recommend checking it out on the Robert Harrop website. As I say, it is £65, and these normally don't stay in stock for long. I'm not going to make a prediction of how long this will be in for, because I was naturally quite wrong with the Mandrill. I did say that it will be in stock for quite a long time, and it did in fact sell out before the Special Weapons Dalek. By buying this, you are kind of buying into a more niche collectible that is a really nice little complement to your Second Doctor collection. Thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more Robert Harrop Doctor Who limited edition hand-painted figurine statue reviews in the future, along with many other Doctor Who product reviews in there as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.